There is a moment, that many people experience later in life when a strange realization kind of sets in. They are functioning, they are responsible, they are productive, and yet, something just feels unfamiliar. Decisions start to feel heavier, reactions feel, automatic rather than chosen. The sense of being rooted in oneself has thinned. This loss doesn't arrive with any drama, it arrives quietly, layered over years of adaptation, until one day a person notices they no longer recognize their own instincts. This isn't confusion in the casual sense, it's actually a disconnection from identity. History shows us that people rarely lose touch with who they are because of sudden trauma alone. More often, identity erodes gradually through survival. When environments change faster than values can stabilize, people adapt just to endure. Over time, adaptation becomes habit, and habit becomes character, even when it no longer reflects the inner self. What looks like maturity on the outside can sometimes, honestly, be prolonged self-abandonment on the inside. Why identity was once reinforced through role rather than reflection explains so much of the modern struggle. In earlier societies, identity was shaped by responsibility, craft, kinship, and contribution. People knew who they were because their actions had a clear place in the social fabric. Identity was lived outwardly before it was examined inwardly. Today, identity is treated as an internal puzzle to be solved through thought alone, often detached from consistent action. Without external anchors, the sense of self just becomes fragile. How people begin to lose touch with themselves through constant adaptation is honestly one of the most overlooked patterns of modern life. Adaptation is necessary in unstable environments, but when it becomes continuous, it fragments the self. People learn to read rooms quickly, to adjust tone, to soften opinions, to suppress instincts. Each adjustment feels harmless, but over time, the person who adapts everywhere belongs nowhere, including within themselves. What was once flexibility becomes disorientation. Why approval quietly replaces alignment as a guiding force accelerates this process. When belonging feels uncertain, people begin measuring decisions by acceptance rather than coherence. They choose what will be tolerated over what is true. Historically, this was dangerous. Groups relied on individuals who could maintain orientation under pressure. Today, social pressure is constant, but subtle. The reward for compliance is inclusion. The cost is identity clarity. How modern life separates action from meaning further weakens the sense of self. Historically, effort and outcome were closely linked. You could see the result of your labor. Modern systems abstract contribution. Many people work without witnessing impact. Without visible consequence, action loses meaning, and identity loses reinforcement. A person may work hard for years and still feel internally empty, not because they lack discipline, but because their actions no longer reflect who they are becoming. Why people often mistake identity loss for laziness or lack of motivation deepens the problem. Motivation fades when direction disappears. Historically, people did not rely on motivation. They relied on duty, structure, and rhythm. When identity is unclear, motivation becomes erratic, because the mind no longer knows what it is working toward. This is not weakness, it is misalignment. How identity erodes through small, repeated compromises is where the process becomes visible. Each time a person ignores a value for convenience, dismisses an instinct to avoid discomfort, or stays silent to preserve harmony, the mind records it. Over time, trust in one's own signals weakens. The person becomes less decisive, not because they lack intelligence, but because they no longer know which internal voice to trust. Why reclaiming identity requires action rather than introspection is a lesson history repeats. Identity is not discovered by thinking alone, it is clarified through behavior. People regain a sense of self when they choose principles and live them consistently. For example, if reliability matters, begin by keeping small commitments regardless of mood. If honesty matters, speak plainly even when it costs social comfort. These actions restore internal coherence. The self becomes legible again. How structure restores identity faster than self-analysis is another historical insight worth recovering. Structure removes endless negotiation. Routines, standards, and boundaries stabilize the inner world. Decide how you begin your day. Decide what behavior you will no longer accept. Decide which obligations matter most. Over time, these decisions accumulate into character. Identity stops feeling abstract because it is expressed daily. Why solitude plays a critical role in reclaiming identity must also be acknowledged. Historically, solitude was not avoidance, it was recalibration. Without periods of quiet, the self becomes reactive, shaped entirely by external demands. Intentional solitude allows instincts to resurface. It creates space for values to be examined and reaffirmed. This is not withdrawal, it is maintenance. What it feels like when people reconnect with who they are is often understated. It does not arrive as excitement, it arrives as clarity. Decisions feel simpler, boundaries feel natural, the need to explain oneself diminishes. Historically, this internal steadiness was what allowed individuals to endure uncertainty without losing direction. If this guide helped you understand how people slowly lose touch with who they are, and how that process can be reversed through structure, alignment, and deliberate action, subscribe to Inner Compass for more long-form explorations of identity, resilience, and human survival across time. Share this video with someone who values depth over distraction, and stay with us because reclaiming the self is not a trend, it is a discipline that has mattered in every era.